The blood-red sunset painted the fjord in shades of crimson and gold, casting long shadows across the charred remains of Ravenholm village. Freya Ironheart stood among the ashes of her life's work, her father's ancient war axe heavy in her hands, as she watched dark smoke still rising from the smoldering ruins. At 36 winters, she had already endured more loss than most, first her husband in the southern raids, now this. But what the marauders who burned her village didn't know, what no one in the fjord settlements knew, was that Freya Ironheart had been born Freya Stoneshield, daughter of the most feared berserker the Northern Realms had ever known. The salt-laden wind carried the scent of ash and death across the once thriving settlement of Ravenholm. What remained told a story of savagery, blackened timbers where sturdy longhouses had stood, shattered shields scattered like fallen leaves, and the unmistakable stillness that follows slaughter. Yet beneath Freya's stoic expression lay something the raiders had failed to extinguish, a cold, calculating fury that had remained dormant for nearly 20 winters. She turned her gaze toward the ancient burial mounds that rose from the headlands overlooking the village. The sacred ground, forbidden to all but the blood-sworn guardians of the old ways, had provided sanctuary when the raiders' longships had appeared on the horizon. In the deepest chamber of the central mound, sealed by runes, no outsider would dare cross. Two small forms huddled in the darkness. Leif and Lena, the twin heirs of Jarl Gunnar, entrusted to Freya's protection with his dying breath. The raiders from the Eastern Isles had slaughtered without mercy or distinction. Warriors, craftsmen, elders, and children alike. Their leader, a towering figure known as Eric the Ruthless, had declared that no bloodline of Ravenholm would continue, that the settlement's lands and access to the rich trading routes would belong to his clan alone. Yet his certainty was built upon ignorance. He didn't understand the secrets hidden beneath the sacred mounds, the ancient passages that connected to sea caves where a small vessel remained concealed, or the power that slept in Freya's blood. She knelt beside the remains of the great hall, fingers brushing against a partially burned tapestry that had once depicted her father's greatest victory at the Battle of Wolfstone Bay. The memories came unbidden, training since childhood in the ancient fighting techniques, learning to channel the berserker fury into cold, deadly precision, the weight of legacy and expectation, all things she had fled when she abandoned her father's hall, to build a life of her own, choosing as a healer and shield maiden of Ravenholm. "I renounced your path once, father," she whispered to the wind. "But it seems the Norns had other plans, woven for me." The axe in her hands, Soul Reaver her father had named it, seemed to hum in response, as though the spirit of the old berserker himself resided in its ancient iron. From the edge of the ruined village, a slight movement caught her eye. Freya's hand instinctively tightened around the axe handle as she tracked the approach of a solitary figure picking through the debris. Relief washed over her as she recognized the familiar gait of Knut, her most trusted friend and Ravenholm's former shipwright. His face was streaked with soot and blood, his normally proud shoulders bent with the weight of survival. "They've gone for now," Knut said as he approached, voice rough from smoke and shouting. "Sailed with the tide toward Thorncliffe Harbor. Their scout boats are still watching the coastline." He glanced at the weapon in her hands, recognition dawning in his eyes. "That axe! I've seen it before, in the old songs. The Soul Reaver of Ulf Stoneshield." His weathered face showed confusion. "How came you by such a weapon?" Freya met his gaze steadily. "It was my birthright, though I left it behind when I came to Ravenholm." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. "There are things you don't know about me, old friend. Things I had hoped would remain buried in the past." Understanding slowly transformed Knut's expression. "The twins," he said urgently. "Did they live?" Freya cut him off, glancing toward the burial mounds. "Hidden where Eric's men feared to tread. The old ways still hold power, even for those who no longer believe." Relief washed over Knut's face, quickly replaced by grim determination. Then not all is lost, but Eric will return when he discovers the children are missing. His claim to these lands depends on the extinction of Gunnar's line. Freya's jaw tightened. He believes he's hunting mere children. He doesn't know he's awakened something far more dangerous. She turned to face the fjord, where the last of the raiders' sails disappeared around the headland. Gather any survivors. We need to move the twins before nightfall. As Knut departed to search for other villagers who might have escaped the slaughter, Freya made her way toward the ancient burial mounds. The path, overgrown and seldom used, felt familiar beneath her feet, a testament to her childhood spent learning the secrets of every terrain under her father's harsh tutelage. The old berserker had insisted that understanding the land was as important as mastering the blade. The warrior who knows where to stand need never fear where to fall, he would say. The entrance to the central mound was concealed behind a stand of ancient yew trees, their twisted trunks forming a natural barrier. To the untrained eye, the stone door was indistinguishable from the surrounding rock face, marked only by weather-worn runes that warned away the superstitious. Freya placed her palm against the cold stone, whispering words taught to her by the village Volva, the wise woman who had recognized something special in Freya from the moment she arrived in Ravenholm. The stone yielded silently, revealing a narrow passage that descended into darkness. Freya took a small torch from its bracket inside the entrance and struck sparks to light it. The flickering flame illuminated walls covered in ancient carvings, tales of gods and heroes, of battles won and lost, and of secrets passed down through generations of guardians. "Leif? Lena?" she called softly as she made her way deeper into the mound. "It's Freya. The danger has passed for now." A rustling sound came from behind an ornately carved burial boat at the chamber's center. Two small figures emerged from the shadows, a boy and girl of 8 winters, their faces smudged with dirt and tear tracks, but their eyes bright with the resilience of youth. Despite everything, Freya felt a surge of pride at their composure. "Did the bad men go away?" Lena asked, her small hand clutching a bone amulet that had been her mother's, a protection charm carved with Freya's own hands. "For now," Freya answered, honestly. She had never believed in shielding children from difficult truths. "But we must move quickly. They may return." Leif stepped forward, his stance mimicking the proud bearing of his fallen father despite his youth. "Where will we go? Everyone is." His voice faltered. "Not everyone," Freya said gently. "Knut survived, and he searches for others now. And you have me." She knelt before them, meeting their eyes. "Long before I came to Ravenholm, I was trained. To face enemies like these, I've hidden that part of myself away, but no longer." The twins exchanged glances, the silent communication that had always fascinated the villagers. Born during a rare solar eclipse, they had been viewed as blessed by the gods, destined for greatness according to the Volva's prophecies. "You're going to fight them," Lena said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Freya answered. "But first I must ensure your safety. Your father entrusted you to my protection, and I will not fail him." She led the children through a side passage unknown to most, a secret route that connected the burial mound to a network of caves that eventually opened to a sheltered cove. Here, years earlier, Freya had hidden a small but seaworthy boat stocked with provisions and essential supplies. It had been her contingency plan, a remnant of her upbringing that taught her to always prepare for the worst. As they emerged from the cave mouth, the setting sun painted the fjord waters in deepening purples and reds. In the distance, smoke still rose from the ruined village, a stark reminder of all that had been lost. Knut awaited them at the water's edge, accompanied by 3 other survivors, Sigrid the weaver, old Torsten the fisherman, and young Eric, Knut's apprentice who had barely seen 16 winters. "This is all?" Freya asked, though she had expected as much. Eric the Ruthless was known for his thoroughness. Knut nodded grimly. All we could find. Many were taken as thralls. Those who resisted. He glanced meaningfully at the twins, leaving the brutal truth unspoken. Freya assessed their small group with a tactician's eye, a skill inherited from her father and honed through years of observation. The children must be taken to safety, somewhere beyond Eirik's reach. Knut, you're the finest navigator in the fjords. Can you sail them to Ironwood Haven? Knut's eyebrows rose in surprise. The trading settlement? It's 3 days' journey, and the seas are treacherous this time of year. It's also under the protection of Jarl Håkon Ironfist, Freya replied. Gunnar saved his life at the Battle of Broken Shields. The blood debt remains unpaid. He will shelter the twins. Understanding dawned in Knut's weathered face. And what will you do? Freya's hand tightened around Soul Reaver's haft. What I was born to do, though I've denied it for 20 winters. Her gaze turned toward Thorncliffe Harbor, where Eric's ships would be anchored. I'm going to remind the raiders why the stone shield. Name once made even the bravest warriors tremble. Knut studied her face, seeing something there that made him step back slightly. You mean to face Eric's entire warband alone? That's madness, Freya. Even if you are Ulf Stoneshield's daughter, I'm more than my father's daughter, Freya cut him off. The berserker blood runs in my veins, yes, but I've learned to control it, to channel it. Eric expects broken survivors, not a calculated response. Surprise will be my shield. She turned to the twins, who watched the exchange with solemn eyes, far older than their years. You must go with Knut and the others. Stay hidden, stay silent, and remember everything your father taught you. A true leader protects their people, even when it means making difficult choices. Leif stepped forward, his small hand reaching for Freya's. Will we see you again? The question pierced through Freya's carefully maintained composure. In truth, she didn't know if she would survive a confrontation with Eric's forces, but she remembered her father's words about the power of conviction. A warrior who hesitates is already defeated. The Norns weave as they will, she replied, using the eye. Traditional phrase that acknowledged fate's uncertainty while offering hope. But I have never been one to accept the threads they offer without a fight. As the small group prepared the boat, Freya took a moment to gaze out across the fjord. The landscape of her adopted home, the soaring cliffs, the deep waters, the ancient forests, had become as much a part of her as the warrior heritage she had tried to leave behind. Now, those two aspects of herself would need to merge if she had any hope of avenging Ravenholm and securing a future for the twins. From a hidden compartment in the boat, Freya withdrew a small wooden chest. Inside lay items she had not touched. In 20 winters, blue war paint made from woad and bear fat, leather arm guards inscribed with her family's protection runes, and a horn pendant that marked her as a daughter of the Stoneshield clan. I never thought to see you use those again, came a gravelly voice behind her. Old Torsten had approached silently, his fisherman's gait surprisingly stealthy for one of his years. Freya glanced up in surprise. You knew? The old man's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. I was young once, Shield Maiden. I fought alongside your father at Wolfstone Bay. I recognized you the moment you arrived in Ravenholm, though I respected your wish for anonymity. Freya absorbed this revelation with shock. You never said anything. Everyone deserves the chance to forge their own path, Torsten replied. But some destinies cannot be outrun forever. He nodded toward the war paint. The Berserker Fury is a terrible gift. Used unwisely, it consumes its wielder. But you always had something your father lacked: restraint. I'll need more than restraint to face Eirik and his raiders, Freya said, closing the chest with a decisive click. Torsten's gnarled hand moved to his belt, withdrawing a small leather pouch. Take this. The Volva gave it to me for safekeeping before they took her. She said it would awaken what sleeps in the blood when the moment demands it. Freya accepted the pouch, feeling the weight of small stones within. Battle runes, she murmured, recognizing their significance. The vulva had been one of the few who suspected Freya's true heritage, though she had never spoken of it directly. With the boat prepared and provisions secured, the time for departure could no longer be delayed. The twins embraced Freya fiercely, their small arms conveying what words could not. She returned their embrace, allowing herself this moment of tenderness before the violence that would surely come. "Remember who you are," she whispered to them. "Children of Jarl Gunnar, heirs of Ravenholm, and under my protection until my last breath." As the small vessel glided silently into the deepening shadows of the fjord, Freya turned her attention to the task ahead. She would not pursue Eric immediately. That would be folly. Instead, she would prepare, reconnect with the training she had abandoned, and plan her approach with the same methodical precision her father had instilled in her. The burial mound would serve as her temporary sanctuary. Within its ancient chambers, she would transform from Freya the healer back into the warrior she had been born to be. The thought should have filled her with dread, but instead, she felt a cold clarity descending. The battle mind her father had praised as her greatest strength. As night fell completely over the ruins of Ravenholm, Freya Ironheart, Freya Stoneshield Reborn, applied the first streaks of blue woad to her face, a silent declaration of intent that no survivor of her coming wrath would ever forget. Eric the Ruthless believed he had extinguished the spirit of Ravenholm in blood and fire. He was about to discover his grave error. In the flickering torchlight of the burial chamber, surrounded by the weapons and treasures of ancient warriors, Freya began to prepare. The axe Soul Reaver lay before her, its edge catching the light like a hungry predator awaiting the hunt. Beside it, she arranged her father's arm guards, the horn pendant, and the pouch of battle runes. Each item represented a piece of herself. She had tried to deny the legacy of violence, strategic cunning, and unyielding will that defined the Stoneshield bloodline. "The time for hiding is over," she whispered to the shadows, her voice echoing among the resting places of the honored dead. "Let them remember why they once feared the North." Dawn broke over Ravenholm with a cold, pale light that revealed the full extent of destruction. Freya emerged from the burial mound transformed, her face marked with the ancestral patterns of the Stoneshield clan, her arms bearing the leather guards inscribed with runes of protection and strength, and her eyes holding a focused intensity that few had ever witnessed and lived to speak of. She moved through the ruined village with deliberate purpose, gathering what supplies remained usable. Her healer's knowledge proved valuable as she identified herbs among the trampled gardens. Those that would staunch bleeding, numb pain, and in higher concentrations, render a man unconscious. The tools of healing could become weapons in knowing hands. Approaching the smoldering remains of the village shrine, Freya knelt to recover a small bronze figurine of Tyr, the one-handed god of war and justice. The irony did not escape her. She had avoided the war god's call for 20 winters, yet now she clasped his likeness like an old friend. "Grant me not victory," she whispered to the small idol, "but justice." Her path took her next to the ruins of the forge, where Bjorn the blacksmith had crafted tools and weapons with equal skill. The raiders had been thorough in their plunder, but they had overlooked the small shed behind the main structure where Bjorn kept his personal projects. Among the scattered implements, Freya found what she sought, a set of throwing axes, small enough to conceal yet balanced for deadly accuracy. Her father had always insisted that a warrior should command distance as well as close combat. As she secured the axes to her belt, movement on the fjord caught her attention. A small fishing boat approached, hugging the coastline to avoid detection. Freya melted into the shadows of a collapsed longhouse, Soul Reaver ready in her hands. When the boat beached on the shingle shore, she recognized the solitary figure who stepped onto land. Ragna, the Volva's apprentice, a young woman with eyes, too old for her years. "I knew you would remain," Ragna called out, seemingly addressing the ruins themselves. "The bones showed your path diverging from the others." Freya emerged from her hiding place, studying the young seeress. "You risked much to return." "Irix, scouts patrol these waters." Ragna's expression remained impassive. The eyes of men see only what they expect to find. "My boat appears as driftwood to those without the sight." She approached Freya, taking in her transformed appearance. "The daughter of Ulf Stoneshield returns. The Volva foresaw this day." "Where is she?" Freya asked, though she suspected the answer. "With the ancestors," Ragna replied, confirming Freya's fears. "She died protecting the runestones. Eric's men seek them still. They believe the stones hold power over the land itself." "And do they?" Freya asked, watching the young woman carefully. A ghost of a smile touched Ragna's lips. "Not as they imagine, but yes. The runes record the sacred places, the hidden paths, the springs that never fail, the caves where a warrior might rest unseen. Knowledge that would serve Irix's ambitions well." "The Volva entrusted old Torsten with battle runes for me," Freya said, producing the small leather pouch. Ragna nodded. "Her final act. She bound them to your bloodline with her dying breath." She gestured to the pouch. "They will awaken what sleeps within you, but beware. Once roused, the berserker spirit is not easily tamed again." Freya's jaw tightened. The berserker rage was both gift and curse among her father's people, a state of battle fury that rendered a warrior nearly unstoppable, impervious to pain, and possessed of inhuman strength. But it came at a cost. Many who surrendered to the Bai fury never fully returned from it, their minds forever fractured by the experience. "I need information before I can act," Freya said, returning the runes to her belt. "Eric's numbers, his defenses, his plans." "This I can provide," Ragna replied. "Come. There is something you must see." The young seeress led Freya to her boat, where beneath a woven covering lay a man, or what remained of one. His breathing came in shallow gasps, his body marked with the unmistakable signs of torture. "Halvard," Freya breathed, recognizing one of Jarl Gunnar's most trusted houseguards. "How did you find him?" "Washed ashore near my hiding place," Ragna explained. "Eric's men questioned him about the twins, then threw him into the fjord to drown. The tide had other plans." Freya knelt beside the dying warrior, her healer's instincts taking precedence over vengeance. His wounds were beyond her skill. Multiple broken bones, deep gashes, and the telltale bluish tinge of a man who had water in his lungs. Yet his eyes flickered open at her touch, recognition dawning in their depths. "Lady Freya," he rasped, blood flecking his lips. "The children—" "Safe," she assured him, taking his hand. Beyond Eric's reach, relief washed over his tortured features. "He knows, suspects they live, searches the coast, has men watching the old roads." Freya leaned closer. "How many warriors does he command, Halvard? Where are they based?" 50, perhaps 60, took Thorncliffe Harbor, using Jarl Olsen's hall as his own. Halvard's breathing grew more labored. "Many of our people, taken as thralls, others kept as hostages, villagers from other settlements." This was valuable intelligence, but Freya sensed the warrior had more to tell. "Why does he want the children so badly? Many raiders would simply kill them and be done." "Prophecy," Halvard managed. "Eastern Seer told him twins born under eclipse would bring his doom, or his glory, if he raised them as his own." His grip on Freya's hand tightened with surprising strength. "He performs blood sacrifices to their gods. 3 nights hence, plans a great ritual. Our captured people, the offerings." Freya felt cold fury solidify in her chest. 3 nights. Not much time to prepare, but enough if she moved with purpose. Rest now, Halvard. You've served your Jarl with honor. The dying warrior's eyes held hers. Avenge them, Stone Shields. Daughter, show him. The wrath of the North. I swear it, Freya replied, her voice carrying the weight of ancient oaths. By my blood and blade. Halvard's eyes closed for the final time, his last breath escaping in a sigh that seemed almost peaceful. Freya gently laid his hand upon his chest, then looked to Ragna. We will send him to Valhalla properly, with fire to light his path. As the flames consumed Halvard's body on a hastily constructed pyre, Freya and Ragna spoke of what must be done. The seeress revealed more details gleaned from her divinations: the layout of Thorncliffe Harbor, the rotation of guards, the location of prisoners, and most importantly, Eric's personal habits. He keeps a shield maiden as his personal guard, Ragna explained. Brynhild the Tall. They say she has never lost a challenge. Every shield breaks eventually, Freya replied, staring into the flames. Tell me of this ritual Halvard mentioned. Ragna's expression darkened. Eric follows the blood path, an ancient and forbidden practice from the far eastern lands. He believes sacrificing worthy enemies strengthens his connection to the gods, making him invulnerable in battle. No warrior is invulnerable, Freya said, memories of her father's teachings surfacing. Each has a weakness, if you have the patience to discover it. As the pyre burned down to embers, Freya's strategy began to take shape. Direct confrontation would be suicide. Even with her skills and heritage, she could not face 60 warriors alone. But she had other advantages: knowledge of the land, the element of surprise, and a lifetime of training in the subtle arts of war that went beyond mere strength of arms. I need to see Thorncliffe Harbor with my own eyes, she decided. Tonight, under cover of darkness. Ragna nodded. I will accompany you. My boat will draw no attention. The remainder of the day passed in careful preparation. Freya used the time to reacquaint herself with weapons and techniques she had set aside 20 winters before. In the secluded clearing behind the burial mound, she moved through the ancient battle forms her father had drilled into her since childhood. The flowing sequences that linked attack and defense into a deadly dance. The weight of Soul Reaver in her hands felt increasingly familiar as muscle memory awakened. The axe had always seemed to anticipate her intentions, moving as an extension of her will rather than a separate object. Her father claimed it had been forged with blood iron from 3 generations of Stone Shield warriors, giving it a spirit of its own. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Freya prepared for the night's reconnaissance. She darkened her face and hands with ash mixed with bear fat, donned a black woolen cloak taken from the burial goods of a long-dead warrior, and filled a small pouch with herbs that would dull her scent from any tracking hounds. Ragna watched these preparations with quiet assessment. You move differently now, she observed. Less like the healer of Ravenholm, more like a predator, Freya finished, meeting the seeress's gaze. My father's first lesson: to hunt a man, you must think like one, move like one, become the very shadow of death at his heels. The memory brought with it a cascade of others: harsh training in all weather, endless drills until her muscles screamed for mercy, and her father's unyielding voice. Hesitation is death, girl. Strike true, or don't strike at all. You feared this part of yourself, Ragna said, her tone making it not quite a question. Freya secured the throwing axes at the small of her back, where they would remain hidden, yet accessible. I saw what the berserker rage did to my father. In his final years, he could barely distinguish friend from foe. The fury consumed him from within, ate away at his humanity until little remained but the warrior. Yet you embrace it now. Not embrace, Freya corrected. Control, use, direct. The rage is a weapon like any other. The mistake is in surrendering to it completely. As twilight settled over the fjord, Freya and Ragna set out in the small fishing boat. They kept close to the shoreline, where the deepening shadows provided cover from watchful eyes. Ragna handled the craft with surprising skill, navigating through treacherous rocks with the confidence of one who had made this journey many times. The journey to Thorncliffe Harbor took nearly 2 hours, during which neither woman spoke. Freya used the time to center herself, employing the breathing techniques that helped sharpen her senses for what lay ahead. The last time she had scouted an enemy position had been alongside her father during the North Shore raids. A lifetime ago, it seemed. They beached the boat in a small cove a mile from the harbor, concealing it beneath branches and seaweed. From here, they would continue on foot along a narrow game trail that wound through the coastal forest. Ragna led the way, moving with the silent confidence of one accustomed to avoiding notice. As they crested a wooded ridge overlooking Thorncliffe Harbor, Freya felt her breath catch. What had once been a peaceful fishing and trading settlement now resembled a war camp. Eric's longships lined the harbor, their dragon-head prows seeming to snarl in the torchlight. Warriors moved about with the swagger of conquerors, and makeshift pens held captured villagers like cattle awaiting slaughter. At the center of it all stood the great hall of Jarl Olsen, now draped with Eirik's red and black banners. A large clearing before the hall had been transformed into a ritual space, a stone altar erected at its center, surrounded by torches mounted on tall poles carved with Eastern symbols. "The sacrifice will happen there," Ragna whispered, pointing to the altar. "When the moon reaches its zenith 3 nights from now." Freya studied the encampment with a tactician's eye, noting guard positions, weaponry, and potential weaknesses. Eirik had been thorough in his occupation, but not flawless. His men were growing comfortable in their victory, their movements suggesting the decreased vigilance that comes with assumed safety. "There," she murmured, pointing to a structure near the water's edge. "The old storehouse. They're using it to hold prisoners?" Ragna nodded. "The most valuable ones. Those deemed worthy of sacrifice." "And Eirik?" "The hall. He's claimed Olsen's high seat for himself. Sleeps in the Jarl's chambers with Brynhild guarding his door." Freya continued her assessment, committing details to memory. The rotation of guards, the location of weapon stores, the patterns of movement. Throughout the camp. After nearly an hour of observation, she had seen enough. "They're confident," she concluded, as they made their way back toward the hidden boat. "Too confident. They post guards but don't expect true resistance." "Why would they?" Ragna replied. "They believe all warriors of Ravenholm dead or captured." "A mistake that will cost them dearly," Freya said, her voice cold with resolve. "I've seen what I needed. Now I prepare." The return journey passed in strategic planning. By the time they reached the ruins of Ravenholm, Freya had outlined her approach. Not a frontal assault, but a campaign of fear and confusion that would culminate on the night of the planned sacrifice. "I will need to gather specific supplies," she told Ragna as they secured the boat. "Certain herbs from the coastal caves, pitch from the old pine groves, and something from the burial mound that I haven't touched in many years." "What do you intend?" the seeress asked. A grim smile touched Freya's lips for the first time since the destruction of her home. "My father taught me that the most powerful weapon against any foe is terror. Before I strike at Eirik directly, I will remind his men why raiders once feared to approach these shores." In the pale light of early dawn, Freya stood once more before the hidden entrance to the burial mound. She whispered the words that would grant her passage, but this time she continued deeper into the ancient structure than she had gone before. Past the main chamber, through a narrow passage that few knew existed, she came to a sealed stone door marked with warnings in the oldest form of runes. Here, according to legend, lay the remains of the first stone shield, the warrior from whom her bloodline descended. With him were buried the instruments of a darker kind of warfare than mere blade and axe. Freya pressed her palm against the stone, reciting words taught to her in childhood. "Blood calls to blood. Steel calls to bone. Open now to your daughter, last of the ancient line. The stone yielded with a sound like a drawn breath, revealing a small chamber untouched by time. At its center stood a stone sarcophagus, its lid carved with the image of a warrior in the throes of battle fury. Surrounding it were weapons of strange design, hooked blades, barbed spears, and devices whose purpose was not immediately apparent. But Freya had not come for these. Her attention focused on a small iron chest set at the foot of the sarcophagus. This, her father had told her, contained the most feared weapon in the Stone Shield arsenal. Not for its physical damage, but for its effect on the minds of enemies. "Forgive me, ancestor," she murmured as she approached the chest. "Necessity drives me to disturb your rest." As her hand touched the ancient iron, Freya felt a surge of something primal move through her blood. The first stirring of the berserker rage that was her birthright, awakening after decades of suppression. For a moment, her vision tinged red. At the edges, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. With iron discipline, she forced the fury back, containing it within the cage of her will. "Not yet," she whispered. "Soon, but not yet." The chest opened with a sound like distant thunder, revealing its contents. A small clay pot sealed with wax, a coil of strange fiber that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness, and a scroll of parchment so old it threatened to crumble at a touch. These were the tools she would need for what was to come. The first phase of a plan that would build over 3 days to culminate on the night when Eirik thought to sacrifice Ravenholm's captured people to his dark gods. By the time she emerged from the burial mound, the sun had fully risen. Ragna waited at the entrance, her expression solemn. "You found what you sought," the seeress said, not quite a question. Freya nodded, the iron chest secure in her arms. "Tonight, we begin. By dawn tomorrow, Eric's men will know fear. By the second dawn, they will know doubt. And by the third night, when he prepares his sacrifice, they will know despair." The daughter of Ulf Stoneshield looked toward Thorncliffe Harbor, her eyes holding the cold calculation of a predator assessing its prey. The warriors who had destroyed her home believed themselves conquerors, secure in their victory. They would soon learn otherwise. The iron chest opened with a creak of ancient hinges, revealing contents that glinted dully in the dim light. Freya lifted out a curved horn, blackened with age, its surface carved with symbols so old they predated the runes used by modern vulvas. Next came a small clay jar sealed with wax and bound with sinew. Last, she withdrew a bundle wrapped in oiled leather, the contents shifting slightly as she handled it. "The weapons of fear," she whispered, memories of her father's teachings echoing in her mind. These weren't tools of direct combat, but instruments designed to break an enemy's resolve before blade ever met flesh. She secured the items in her satchel and made her way back through the winding passages of the burial mound. Outside, Ragna waited, her expression solemn as she observed Freya's emergence from the sacred place. "You found what you sought," the seeress stated. "The tools my ancestors used to drive terror into the hearts of their enemies," Freya confirmed. "Tonight, we begin." They spent the day in preparation, gathering materials from the fjord's edge, the pine forest, and the ruins of Ravenholm itself. By sunset, Freya had assembled everything needed for the first phase of her plan. She mixed crushed charcoal with pine resin to create a thick, sticky substance that would burn slowly and produce dense smoke. To this, she added certain herbs from her healer's stores, harmless to breathe but producing vivid hallucinations in those who inhaled their smoke. "The eastern outpost first," she explained to Ragna as darkness fell. "Eric's smallest garrison, 5 men watching the coastal approach." Ragna studied the mixture Freya had prepared. "They will see things that aren't there." "Worse," Freya replied. "They will see their deepest fears made manifest." She dressed in layers of dark clothing, her face and exposed skin blackened with ash. Soul Reaver was secured to her back, the throwing axes at her belt, and a long hunting knife sheathed at her thigh. Around her neck hung the horn from the burial mound, the fear-bringer, her father had called it. "I will return before dawn," she told Ragna. "Be ready to move quickly when I do." The journey to the eastern outpost took an hour of careful movement through terrain Freya knew intimately. The raiders had established their watchpost on a rocky promontory overlooking the fjord, a natural position that gave them clear views of any approaching vessels. 5 warriors, just as Halvard had reported, clustered around a fire that would ruin their night vision while making them perfect targets. Freya circled their position, using the rocky terrain for cover as she placed small clay pots of her mixture at strategic points surrounding the camp. Each was connected by a thin cord soaked in pine resin that would carry fire swiftly. When all was ready, she retreated to a sheltered position downwind, where the drugged smoke wouldn't reach her. From her pouch, she removed the curved horn and raised it to her lips. The sound it produced wasn't the bright, clear note of a war horn, but something older and more primal, a deep, resonating moan that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. The warriors at the fire stiffened, hands moving to weapons as they scanned the darkness. Freya released a burning ember onto the nearest cord. Fire raced along the resin-soaked line, igniting the pots in rapid succession. Thick, greenish smoke billowed upward, caught by the night breeze and carried directly into the raiders' camp. The horn sounded again, this time in a pattern that rose and fell like the death cries of a wounded beast. Through the swirling smoke, Freya could see the warriors on their feet now, weapons drawn, shouting to each other as the drugged mist enveloped them. She moved then, silent as a hunting wolf, circling. Their position, the bundle from the burial mound, yielded its secrets. A collection of small carved figures, each bearing the same unsettling visage, ancient symbols of death and doom. She placed these at the edges of their camp, just visible through the thickening. Smoke! A warrior staggered toward one of the figures, his eyes widening in horror as the herbs took effect. "Draugr!" he screamed, slashing wildly at the air. "The dead walk!" The horn sounded a third time, closer now, its eerie vibrations carrying through bone and sinew. Freya moved among the smoke like a ghost, sometimes visible as a shadowy figure. At the corner of vision, sometimes only a suggestion of movement in the darkness. The warriors' discipline crumbled as the hallucinogenic smoke clouded their minds. They saw death spirits in every shadow, heard whispers of doom in every breeze. One man fired arrows wildly into the darkness. Another swung his sword at phantoms only he could see. "It is her!" cried one, pointing toward where Freya had momentarily revealed herself, her face marked with the old symbols of the Stoneshield clan. The vengeful spirit of Ravenholm. Freya selected her target, the leader, identifiable by his ornamented helmet. From the shadows, she loosed one of the small throwing axes. It struck with precision, biting deep into the man's thigh. He howled in pain and terror, collapsing to the ground as his men scattered in panic. She didn't pursue them. This night wasn't meant for killing, but for sowing fear. Let the survivors flee to Thorncliffe Harbor with tales of spirits and vengeance. Let uncertainty spread through Eric's ranks like poison. The leader remained, unable to flee with his wounded leg. Freya approached him through the swirling smoke, Soul Reaver now in her hands, her face painted in patterns he would recognize from the old stories, the mark of a berserker. "Tell Eirik," she said, her voice pitched low and terrible. "The children of Ravenholm are under my protection. Tell him Freya Stoneshield has returned from the halls of her ancestors to claim vengeance." Terror blanched the man's face as he recognized the name. Stoneshield? That line is dead. As dead as I appear? She asked, letting him see her fully now. The war paint, the ancient symbols, the legendary axe. "Tell your master the blood debt must be paid. For every life taken at Ravenholm, I will claim one of your warriors." She left him there, trembling, and wounded but alive to carry her message. By morning, Eirik would know that something unexpected haunted the shores of the fjord. The first seeds of doubt would be planted. Freya melted back into the darkness, retrieving her carved figures and remaining weapons. The raid had gone perfectly, no life taken, yet fear unleashed like a plague among Eric's men. She made her way back toward Ravenholm, pausing at intervals to leave more of the carved figures along paths the raiders would likely travel. When she returned to their hiding place near the burial mound, Ragna was awaiting her with fresh supplies and news, gleaned through her mysterious methods. "Your message spreads," the seeress confirmed. The survivors reached Thorncliffe Harbor an hour past, babbling of ghosts and Draugr. Eirik is furious, but unsettled. He has doubled the guards at the harbor. Freya nodded in satisfaction as she cleansed the war paint from her face. Good. Let him waste his strength defending against shadows. What of our people? Still held for the ritual. Eirik believes their sacrifice will grant him protection against whatever haunts the fjord. Tomorrow night we strike the western outpost, Freya decided, checking her remaining supplies. The second phase must leave no doubt that his forces face something beyond mere mortal revenge. She opened the clay jar from the burial mound, revealing a thick paste of deep crimson, the blood of her ancestors, preserved through ancient methods and mixed with substances that would burn with unnatural intensity. "The old ways remember," she murmured, dipping her fingers into the mixture. On a flat stone, she began sketching symbols that hadn't been seen in the north for generations, bindrunes of power that her father had taught her in secret, combinations meant to focus intention and summon aid from beyond the veil of the living. "You walk a dangerous path," Ragna observed. "Such workings demand payment." "I am prepared to pay," Freya replied, continuing her careful tracing of the ancient symbols. "Whatever the cost." As the runes took shape under her hands, Freya felt something stir in the air around them, a pressure change, as before a storm, but concentrated within the small space where they worked. The berserker blood in her veins warmed in response, recognizing the power being called. This was the essence of her plan. Not just to strike fear through mundane means, but to awaken the old terrors that still lingered in the collective memory of all who sailed northern waters. Eirik had brought slaughter and fire to Ravenholm. She would bring something far worse to him. She would bring the wrath of forgotten gods. Dawn brought news of chaos at Thorncliffe Harbor. Through Ragna's mysterious network of informants, ordinary folk who remained loyal to Ravenholm, Freya learned that Eirik had executed 2 of the survivors from the eastern outpost for cowardice, refusing to believe their tales of vengeful spirits. Yet his actions betrayed his unease. He had posted additional guards around the hall and ordered torches kept burning throughout the night. "Fear takes root," Freya observed, applying fresh war paint in preparation for the night's work. "Now we must nurture it." The western outpost presented a greater challenge. 10 warriors garrisoned in an abandoned fishing hut, watching the old trade road. Unlike the eastern lookouts, these men were seasoned fighters, veterans of many raids who would not be easily frightened by shadows and smoke. "I'll need water from the sacred spring," Freya told Ragna, "and hair from a corpse." The seeress nodded without question. Such ingredients were common in the workings of old magic, though few now remembered their proper use. While Ragna departed to gather these materials, Freya continued her preparations, crafting small parcels of resin mixed with powdered mushrooms and binding them with thin strands of copper wire, a metal that would react with the ingredients to create flames of unnatural color. By midday, Freya had completed a necklace of these parcels and turned her attention to the crimson paste from the burial mound. Using a fine-tipped brush of boar bristle, she painted intricate patterns on pieces of birch bark. Symbols her father had taught her would incite primal terror when glimpsed in firelight. Ragna returned with a leather flask of water from the hidden spring beneath the great oak and several strands of dark hair taken from one of Ravenholm's fallen. Freya accepted these with solemn reverence, adding the hair to her mixture and sprinkling drops of the sacred water into the crimson paste. "What happens tonight will test their courage beyond breaking," she explained as she worked. "Warriors can face death in battle, but few can stand against the terror of the unknown." The plan for the western outpost required more precision than the previous night's work. Rather than attacking from outside, Freya would infiltrate the fishing hut itself, striking at the heart of their security. As twilight approached, she and Ragna made their way through forest paths, known only to those born of Ravenholm, arriving at a vantage point overlooking the abandoned settlement where the raiders had made their camp. "Wait here," Freya instructed, securing Soul Reaver across her back. "If I have not returned by midnight, make for Ironwood Haven. Tell Jarl Hakon what has happened." Ragna clasped her arm in the warrior's grip. "Your ancestors watch over you, Stone Shield." The approach required patience. Freya circled the outpost, noting the positions of sentries and the rotation of their watches. 2 men guarded the perimeter, while the others remained inside the hut, visible through cracks in the wooden walls. As they drank and diced by firelight, she waited for the changing of the guard, when attention would be divided between those ending their watch and those beginning. Moving like a shadow across the open ground, she reached the side of the hut furthest from the sentries. A small window, little more than a gap in the logs, provided her entry point. Inside, thick smoke from the central hearth obscured the rafters. Freya pulled herself up and through the narrow opening, rolling silently onto the rough-hewn beams that supported the roof. Below her, 8 warriors lounged in various states of alertness, weapons close at hand, but minds dulled by mead and boredom. From her position among the shadows, Freya carefully placed the birch bark runes at intervals along the rafters, securing them with pine resin. Each was positioned to catch the firelight when activated. Next, she sprinkled the remaining sacred water onto the hearth fire from a small clay vial, the droplets hissing as they struck the flames. The warriors paid no attention to the sound, attributing it to greenwood or dampness in the fuel. But the water from the sacred spring was already working its influence, causing the fire to burn with an increasingly blue tinge at its edges. When all was prepared, Freya withdrew the blackened horn from her belt and pressed it to a gap in the roof thatch. The mournful, otherworldly tone it produced seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once, freezing the warriors in place. Before they could recover from their shock, she dropped the first of her resin parcels directly into the hearth. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. The fire erupted in a column of green-blue flame that reached nearly to the ceiling, casting eerie, dancing shadows across the walls. In the same moment, the birch bark runes caught fire, their painted symbols glowing with unnatural intensity. "What sorcery is this?" shouted one of the warriors, leaping to his feet. Freya dropped another parcel, this one producing a cloud of crimson smoke that billowed outward, carrying with it the hallucinogenic compounds she had prepared. As the warriors staggered in confusion, she sounded the horn again, 3 short blasts that reverberated through the small space with bone-shaking intensity. "The Draugr!" cried one man, pointing toward the door where nothing stood. "They come. For us." Taking advantage of the growing panic, Freya lowered herself partially from the rafters, ensuring that what they saw was a nightmarish figure suspended above them, face painted with death symbols, eyes reflecting the unnatural firelight, ancient weapons gleaming with malevolent purpose. "Eric the Oathbreaker," she intoned, her voice pitched to an inhuman register, "has awakened what should remain sleeping. The children of Ravenholm are under my protection. The blood debt must be paid." The warriors broke, their courage shattered by the combination of drugs, fire, and primal terror. They scrambled for the door, trampling each other in their haste to escape. Outside, the sentries were already fleeing, having seen the unnatural light and heard the horn's call. Freya dropped to the floor of the now empty hut, quickly gathering her remaining materials. The fire was dying down, returning to normal colors, as the sacred water's influence faded. She scattered the remaining runes around the site, ensuring they would be found by any who came to investigate. As she melted back into the forest, she heard the distant sounds of the warriors crashing through undergrowth, their panicked flight taking them in all directions. None would reach Thorncliffe Harbor before morning, and when they did, their tales would only add to the growing atmosphere of dread. Ragna awaited her at their agreed meeting place, eyes wide with question. "It is done," Freya confirmed. "By dawn, Eric will know that nowhere is safe from Stoneshield's vengeance." They returned to their hidden camp near the burial mound as the moon reached its zenith. The night's work had taken much of Freya's strength, but she allowed herself only a brief rest. The final phase of her plan would require every resource she possessed. "Tomorrow night is the ritual of sacrifice," Ragna reminded her as she checked her weapons. "Eric will be desperate now. Frightened men are unpredictable." "Fear makes them unpredictable," Freya agreed, cleaning blood-tinged war paint from her face. "But it also makes them careless. He will seek to complete his ritual at any cost, believing it will protect him from what haunts his steps." She unwrapped a small bundle of herbs gathered from the ruins of her healer's hut. Unlike the hallucinogens used against the outposts, these were chosen for their medicinal properties, plants that would clear the mind, numb pain, and provide unnatural stamina. "Tomorrow I face Eric himself," she said, crushing the herbs into a paste with practiced movements. Not with tricks or terror, but with steel and skill. Her fingers moved to the pouch of battle runes the Volva had sent. She had not yet employed them, knowing their power came with significant cost. But for what lay ahead, she would need every advantage. "The path you walk," Ragna said quietly, "may lead to the halls of your ancestors." Freya nodded, accepting this. "Truth without fear. If that is my fate, so be it. But I will not journey alone. Eirik will accompany me, and we will see which of us Odin welcomes to his table." She spread the battle runes before her, studying their worn surfaces in the firelight. Each bore a symbol of power: Tiwaz for victory, Thurisaz for destructive force, Algiz for protection. Used properly, they would awaken the full measure of her berserker heritage, granting strength and speed beyond mortal limits. Used improperly, they would consume her entirely, leaving nothing but a mindless vessel of rage that would destroy friend and foe alike. "The third night approaches," she murmured, gathering the runes into their pouch. "Let Eric prepare his sacrifices. He will find that the old gods have already chosen their offering." In the darkness of the burial mound, surrounded by the weapons and relics of her ancestors, Freya Stoneshield sharpened her blades and hardened her resolve. The time for shadow games was ending. Tomorrow, blood would answer blood, and the children of Ravenholm would be avenged. The final day dawned gray and heavy with the promise of storm, fitting weather for what was to come. Freya stood at the edge of the fjord, letting the cold water lap at her feet as she performed the ritual cleansing her father had taught her before battle. Each handful of water she poured over her head represented a prayer to the gods: strength from Thor, cunning from Loki, wisdom from Odin, and protection for the innocent from Frigg. Ragna approached as Freya completed the rite, carrying a bundle wrapped in oiled leather. News from Thorncliffe Harbor. Eric's men desert him. 12 warriors fled during the night, taking a small boat south. "Yet he persists with the ritual?" Freya asked, drying herself with a length of wool. "With greater determination. He has moved, the time to sunset rather than midnight. He believes completing the sacrifice sooner will protect him from what haunts his steps." Ragna unwrapped the bundle, revealing armor Freya had not seen in 20 winters, her father's battle leathers, reinforced with small iron plates at the shoulders and chest. "I found it where you said it would be, hidden in the northern cave." Freya. ran her fingers over the worn leather, memories flooding back of the last time she had worn this armor. The raid on Serpent's Bay, where she had first questioned her father's path of violence, where she had chosen to walk away from her heritage. "The time for denial is past," she said softly, lifting the breastplate. The leather remained supple. Despite the years, treated with oils and resins that preserved it against time and the elements. The iron plates, though spotted with rust, would still turn aside a blade. While she donned the armor, Ragna prepared the mixture that would clear Freya's mind and sharpen her senses for the coming battle. Unlike the hallucinogens used against Eric's men, this brew contained stimulants and pain suppressants, dandelion root, willow bark, and certain mushrooms that grew only in the shadows of ancient burial grounds. "Your father used such preparations." "Before battle?" Ragna asked, grinding the ingredients with a stone mortar. "All berserkers do," Freya confirmed, adjusting the arm guards. "The rage gives strength, but it clouds judgment. This helps maintain clarity amidst the fury." When the mixture was prepared, Freya drank it in a single draught, grimacing at the bitter taste. Almost immediately, she felt its effects. A spreading warmth through her limbs, a heightened awareness of her surroundings, and a curious detachment from physical discomfort. Next came the war paint, applied with ritual precision. Unlike the terrifying patterns used during her night raids, these markings were meant for true battle. Blue lines that followed the contours of face and arms, symbols of protection, and strength placed at vital points. Ragna assisted with those Freya could not reach, painting runes of victory between her shoulder blades. "The old ways remember," the seeress murmured as she worked. "The patterns awaken what sleeps in the blood." When the preparations were complete, Freya stood fully transformed, no longer the healer of Ravenholm, but a warrior of the Stone Shield line, armored in leather and iron, marked with the sacred patterns of her ancestors, Soul Reaver secured at E. Her back and smaller weapons distributed about her person. "The plan remains unchanged," she told Ragna, checking each weapon one final time. "You will guide our people from the storehouse while I confront Eirik. Once they are clear, make for the small cove where we beached your boat. A larger vessel awaits, hidden beneath the overhanging cliff." "And if you do not come?" Ragna asked, her eyes searching Freya's face. "Then you sail without me. Take our people to Ironwood Haven. Tell Jarl Hakon that Freya Stoneshield paid her blood debt." She clasped the seeress's arm. "And tell the twins that I kept my oath to their father." Their final preparations complete, they departed the burial mound as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Rather than risk detection, on the water they would approach Thorncliffe Harbor by land, using the hidden paths Freya had known since childhood. The journey would take longer but offer greater security and the element of surprise. As they traveled, Ragna shared what her informants had revealed about the ritual preparations. "Eric has chosen 12 captives for sacrifice, one for each month of the year. He believes this will grant him protection from all seasons of misfortune." "And the altar?" Freya asked, moving with practiced silence through the dense forest. "Set before the Great Hall, as you saw. 4 warriors stand guard, at each cardinal direction. Brynhild remains at Eirik's side. He wears his ceremonial armor, more decorative than protective. This was valuable intelligence. Eric's vanity might prove his undoing if his ritual garb sacrificed function for appearance. Brynhild, however, would represent the greater threat. From what Freya had gathered, the Shield Maiden was skilled and utterly loyal to her master. "What of the remaining captives?" Freya pressed. "Those not chosen for the ritual?" "Kept in the storehouse still, guarded by 6 warriors, though they grow increasingly nervous. The tales from the outposts have affected them deeply. By late afternoon, they reached a ridge overlooking Thorncliffe Harbor. From their vantage point, they could see the ritual preparations in progress. The altar stone had been decorated with strange symbols, Eastern runes that Freya recognized, as invoking dark powers. Torches mounted on tall poles surrounded the ritual space, though they remained unlit in the daylight. At the center, Eric himself supervised the arrangement of ceremonial objects, his tall figure resplendent in gilded armor that caught the fading sunlight. "He fears what comes from the darkness," Freya observed. "So we will strike before true night falls, while the shadows lengthen, but visibility remains." They circled the settlement, approaching the storehouse from the seaward side where fewer guards were posted. Most of Eric's remaining force was concentrated around the ritual space, leaving other areas more vulnerable. Still, they would need to neutralize the storehouse guards silently to avoid raising the alarm prematurely. "Stay hidden until I have dealt with the guards," Freya instructed Ragna as they crouched in the shelter of abandoned fishing boats. "When the captives are free, move them toward the cove in small groups. Priority to the elderly and children." She removed the pouch of battle runes from her belt, selecting 3 stones. Tiwaz for victory, Uruz for strength, and Algiz for protection. Following her father's teaching, she pressed each rune briefly to her tongue, tasting the ancient markings before returning them to the pouch. The effect was immediate, a surge of power through her blood, heightening her already enhanced senses and awakening the berserker heritage that had lain dormant for so long. "It begins," she whispered, feeling the familiar battle clarity descending. Time seemed to slow, sounds became sharper, and every muscle responded with preternatural readiness. Moving like a shadow across the open ground between the boats and the storehouse, Freya approached the first guard from behind. One hand clamped over his mouth while the other drove a thin-bladed knife into the base of his skull, a clean death, silent and instant. She lowered the body gently to avoid alerting his companions. The second guard fell just as quietly, a throwing axe finding its mark in his throat before he could cry out. The remaining 4 were positioned in pairs at the storehouse entrance, more alert than their fallen comrades. Freya would need to take them simultaneously to prevent alarm. From her belt, she withdrew 2 of the resin parcels used in her raid on the western outpost. These contained no hallucinogens, only compounds that would produce intense light and disorienting noise. She threw them in high arcs, landing them just behind the guards. When the parcels erupted in brilliant flashes and sharp cracks like thunder, the guards instinctively turned toward the source. In that moment of distraction, Freya struck, Soul Reaver finally singing free of its harness. The ancient axe moved as if possessing a will of its own, its edge finding the vulnerable points in the guard's armor with uncanny precision. In less than the span of 10 heartbeats, all 6 guards lay dead or dying. Freya signaled to Ragna, who rushed forward to begin freeing the captives. "Work quickly," Freya urged, keeping watch for any sign their action had been detected. The ritual begins at sunset. Inside the storehouse, they found nearly 30 people from Ravenholm and neighboring settlements, bound and weakened by days of poor treatment. Many showed signs of beatings, and all bore the hollow-eyed look of those who expected death. Their expressions transformed to disbelief and then desperate hope as Freya and Ragna cut their bonds. "You live," breathed one elderly woman, reaching trembling fingers toward Freya's face. "The Stone Shield daughter returns to us." "Save your strength," Freya replied, supporting the woman to her feet. "Ragna will lead you to safety. Move in silence, and stay close to the shoreline." As the captives were organized into small groups for the escape, Freya prepared for the next phase of her plan. The sun now hung low on the horizon, painting the fjord in crimson and gold. Eric would soon begin his ritual, leading the first sacrificial victims to the altar. The time for shadow games and terror was past. Now blood would answer blood. "Go," she told Ragna, clasping her arm one final time. "Get our people to safety. What follows is between Eric and me." The seeress held her gaze. "Your father's spirit watches, Stone Shield. May your axe strike true." With the captives moving stealthily toward the hidden cove, Freya turned her attention to the ritual space. Eirik had assembled his remaining warriors, perhaps 20 men in total, positioned strategically around the altar. Brynhild stood at his right hand, her tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. The first group of sacrificial victims had been brought forward, guarded by warriors who seemed to value spectacle over vigilance. Freya circled the gathering, climbing to the roof of a small storage shed that offered a clear view of the proceedings, and a perfect position for what she planned. From this vantage point, she could see Eirik clearly as he raised his arms to address his assembled forces. "Tonight we end the haunting," his voice carried across the harbor. "The spirits that plague us will be appeased with blood. The twins of prophecy will be found and raised under my banner. The power of Ravenholm will be mine." Drawing the blackened horn one final time, Freya raised it to her lips and sounded a single, pure note that cut through the evening air like a blade. The assembled warriors froze, heads turning frantically to locate the source of the sound they had come to fear. "Eirik Oathbreaker," Freya called, her voice carrying the power of the battle runes surging through her blood. "The spirits of Ravenholm are not appeased by innocent blood. They demand yours alone." She stood then, letting them see her fully, armored in the battle leathers of the Stone Shield line, face painted with the symbols of vengeance, Soul Reaver gleaming in the light of the setting sun. The effect on Eirik's men was immediate. Several backed away from the altar, making protective signs against evil. "It is but one woman!" Eirik shouted, though Freya could hear the undertone of fear in his voice. "A trickster playing on your fears! Brynhild, bring me her head!" The Shield Maiden moved with impressive speed, signaling 4 warriors to accompany her as she rushed toward Freya's position. This was expected. Eirik would send his best fighters first, hoping to eliminate the threat quickly while he completed the ritual. Freya did not retreat. Instead, she leapt from the roof, landing directly in Brynhild's path. The battle runes pulsed with power now, sending waves of strength through her limbs and awakening the berserker fury that had slept for so long. Her vision sharpened to preternatural clarity, each movement of her opponent seeming sluggish and predictable. "Daughter of Stone Shield," Brynhild acknowledged, sizing up her opponent with professional assessment. "Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours, Brynhild the Tall," Freya replied. Soul Reaver balanced lightly in her hands. "I would offer you the chance to stand aside." The Shield Maiden's answer came in the form of a lightning-fast thrust with her spear. Freya deflected it with Soul Reaver's haft, stepping inside Brynhild's guard with a speed that surprised even the experienced warrior. The first exchange set the tone for what followed, a deadly dance between skilled opponents, each testing the other's defenses while the 4 accompanying warriors circled cautiously. Freya allowed the berserker blood to rise, but not to consume her. The battle runes and her father's training gave her the control her ancestors had often lacked, the ability to channel the fury rather than surrender to it completely. She moved with calculated aggression, each strike aimed at drawing her opponents into positions of vulnerability. 2 of the warriors fell quickly, unprepared for the ferocity and precision of Freya's attacks. The third lasted longer, his shield absorbing multiple blows before Soul Reaver found the gap between helm and shoulder, ending his fight with brutal efficiency. The fourth broke and ran, heading back toward the ritual space with cries of warning. This left Brynhild, who fought with the skill expected of her reputation. The Shield Maiden adjusted her tactics, recognizing Freya's berserker-enhanced speed and strength. She fought defensively now, seeking to tire her opponent rather than overwhelm her. "You cannot save them all," Brynhild said as they circled each other. "Eirik has already begun the sacrifice." A quick glance confirmed this truth. At the altar, Eirik had forced the first victim to his knees, ritual dagger raised for the killing stroke. The distraction cost Freya, as Brynhild's spear sliced across her ribs, finding a gap in the ancient armor. Pain flared, hot and immediate, but the battle mixture and runes dulled its impact. Freya responded with a feint that drew Brynhild's spear into an overextended thrust, then brought Soul Reaver down on the weapon's shaft, splintering it. The Shield Maiden recovered quickly, drawing a sword from her belt, but the moment's advantage was enough. Freya drove forward with all the power the berserker blood granted her, crashing into Brynhild with force that sent both warriors to the ground. They grappled briefly, but the battle runes had done their work well. With a swift, terrible movement, Freya drove her hunting knife up beneath Brynhild's chin, ending the Shield Maiden's service to Eric forever. Rising to her feet, Freya assessed the situation at the ritual space. Eric's remaining warriors were divided, some moving to intercept her, others staying close to their leader. The captives meant for sacrifice huddled in terrified groups, watching the unfolding chaos with desperate hope. "Eric!" Freya called, her voice carrying across the harbor. "Face me yourself if you have the courage, or do you only fight those who cannot defend themselves?" The challenge struck at his pride, as she had intended. Eirik thrust the ritual dagger into the hands of a subordinate and drew his ornate sword, a weapon made more for show than battle, but dangerous nonetheless. In skilled hands. "I will mount your head on my prow, witch," he snarled, striding forward. "And then I will find those twins you've hidden and raise them to curse your name." Freya moved to meet him, Soul Reaver spinning in a deadly arc that forced Eric's advancing guards to fall back. The berserker rage pulsed stronger now, a red haze at the edges of her vision that threatened to consume her entirely. With iron discipline, she contained it, channeling its power while maintaining control of her actions. When they finally stood face to face, Freya saw uncertainty flicker in Eric's eyes. He had expected many things, but not this. A warrior born of ancient bloodlines, empowered by forgotten rights, fighting with the cold precision that had made the Stoneshield name legendary. "The children of Ravenholm are under my protection," Freya said, her voice carrying to all assembled. "Your men desert you. Your Shield Maiden lies dead. Your captives escape even now. Yield, and I will grant you a clean death." Eric's answer was a wild swing of his sword, powerful but predictable. Freya sidestepped easily, Soul Reaver's edge tracing a line of red across his gilded armor. Not a killing blow, but a message. She could have ended him then, had she chosen to. The battle that followed would be sung of in the fjord settlements for generations to come. Eric fought with the desperate strength of a man who knows defeat means death, his ornate sword flashing in the dying light of the sun. But Freya fought with something beyond mere skill or strength. She fought with the accumulated knowledge of generations of warriors, guided by the battle clarity her bloodline had perfected. 3 times Eric seemed to gain advantage, only for Freya to turn his attacks against him. When he lunged, she was no longer there. When he defended, Soul Reaver found the gaps in his guard. Blood flowed from a dozen minor wounds, staining his golden armor crimson. "The Ravenholm dead watch us, Eric," Freya said as they circled each other. "They cry out for justice." With a roar of rage, Eric charged, abandoning technique for brute force. It was the opening Freya had waited for. Soul Reaver moved in a perfect arc, its edge meeting Eric's neck with unstoppable momentum. The blade passed through flesh and bone with terrible efficiency, completing the circle her father had begun, teaching her so many years ago. Eric's head fell to the ground an instant before his body collapsed. A profound silence descended over Thorncliffe Harbor as his remaining warriors stared in disbelief at their fallen leader. Freya stood over his body, Soul Reaver dripping with the blood of her enemy. The berserker rage still burned in her veins, demanding more violence, more vengeance. With supreme effort, she mastered it, forcing the battle fury back into the depths from which it had risen. "The children of Ravenholm are avenged," she declared, her voice carrying in the stillness. "Those who served Eric have a choice. Leave these shores and never return, or join him in death." The warrior's decision was swift and unanimous. Weapons. clattered to the ground as they backed away, then turned to flee toward the remaining longships. None wished to test themselves against the warrior who had defeated both Brynhild and Eric. Freya moved quickly to free the remaining captives, cutting their bonds with swift strokes of her knife. "Go to the northern cove," she instructed them. "Others await you there. You are returning home." As the freed prisoners hurried away, Freya felt the last of the berserker rage subsiding, leaving exhaustion in its wake. The wound in her side throbbed. Painfully now, the battle mixture wearing off. She made her way to the water's edge, where she performed the ritual cleansing once more, this time washing away the blood of battle rather than preparing for it. By the time she reached the hidden cove, night had fallen completely. Ragna had organized the escaped captives onto the larger vessel Freya had prepared, with the most vulnerable sheltered below decks. The seeress rushed forward when she saw Freya approaching, supporting her as strength continued to ebb from her limbs. "It is done," Freya said simply. "Eric and Brynhild are dead. Their warriors flee." A ragged cheer went up from the gathered survivors, quickly hushed for fear of drawing attention. As Freya boarded the vessel, two small figures broke away from the group and ran toward her, children she had not expected to see again so soon. "Leif? Lena?" she gasped, dropping to one knee despite her injuries. "How are you here?" "Jarl Hakon sent us back with warriors," Leif explained, his young face solemn. "They wait in the eastern fjord with ships and men. Knut said you would need help rebuilding Ravenholm." Freya looked to Ragna, who nodded confirmation. "The riders overtook us on the old forest paths. Jarl Hakon was not content to simply shelter the twins. He has sent 50 warriors and supplies to reclaim Ravenholm in Gunnar's name." Relief and gratitude overwhelmed Freya as the twins embraced her, careful of her wounds. "Then we return home," she said, "not as refugees, but as builders." As their vessel set sail under the light of the rising moon, Freya stood at the prow, Soul Reaver secured once more across her back. The berserker rage had subsided completely now, leaving her with the clarity that comes after battle, the understanding that some parts of ourselves cannot be denied, only channeled and directed toward worthy purposes. Ravenholm would rise again from its ashes. The twins would grow to adulthood in the home of their ancestors, and Freya Stoneshield would guard them, not by hiding her warrior heritage, but by embracing it as part of who she truly was: healer and fighter, protector and avenger, a woman of both peace and war. The legend of how she had used shadow and fear before steel and strength would spread throughout the fjord settlements, growing with each retelling. How a single shield maiden had hidden the twin heirs in ancient burial chambers, then systematically dismantled a raiding force through cunning and courage. How the daughter of Ulf Stoneshield had returned to claim her birthright not as a mindless berserker, but as a strategic warrior who understood that true victory comes from the mind as much as the arm. And if you found yourself captivated by this tale of vengeance and redemption in the frozen north, of a shield maiden who outfoxed the raiders who thought they'd slaughtered her entire village, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. The sagas of the Viking Age hold many more secrets and stories that we're preparing to share with you. Tales of honor and treachery, of hidden heirs and forgotten bloodlines, of the old ways that still whisper through the ancient burial mounds. If you know how to listen, join our band of saga seekers and ensure you never miss the next chapter in our journey through the mist-shrouded fjords of the past.